Hi everyone. Since we can't be together, I've created this video so we can review the ideas and concepts you need to know for the upcoming midterm exam. It's going to cover information from chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 11, 12, and 13. I know that's a lot. The midterm is available on MindTap and it's due by March 29th. For some reason, it only has 47 questions on it, but it's worth 100 points, so each question is worth a little over 2 points. It consists of true, false, and multiple choice questions, so no short answer or essay questions for you to worry about. I'm just going to briefly talk about what you need to know in each chapter, and if I were you, I'd look at any notes you've taken in class, as well as the summary portions of each chapter in your textbook, just to make sure you have a good grasp of the information, and have those things with you when you take the exam. You're going to have 2 hours to complete it once you get started. That should be plenty of time. Okay, let's review. From Chapter 1, which is an overview of public speaking in general, you'll need to know about the Greek philosopher Aristotle and his proofs, or ways in which people are persuaded: ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is source credibility, which is the audience's perception of you as a speaker. In other words, do they see you as being competent and having their best interests in mind? Pathos, that's emotional appeal, trying to get the audience to feel some kind of emotion about the topic. And logos, which is reasoning, in which you try to help the audience understand logically why they should believe you. You also need to know about the Roman orator Cicero's 5 arts of public speaking: invention, coming up with an idea or topic; arrangement, deciding on the structure of that topic; style, choosing the best language to get your message across; memory, remembering all the things you need to know about good speech making; and delivery, effectively giving your speech to the audience. One more important concept you need to know is about storytelling and why it continues to be so important in our lives. Humans are natural storytellers, and this is the main way in which we communicate. In Chapter 2, we looked at speech anxiety. It's very common and nothing to be ashamed of. It's a natural survival reaction. When you're in an uncomfortable or anxiety-provoking situation where you're not sure what's going to happen, it's normal to feel a bit frightened. Our brains and bodies have certain response in these situations that, while they may help us survive if we're being chased by a tiger, aren't necessarily helpful when we're standing in front of a room full of people trying to get a message across to them. The book talks about several different ways to handle this, including lots of relaxation, breathing, and visualization techniques that you should review so you're familiar with them. Of course, the more you prepare and practice your speech, the less anxious you'll be. And then the spotlight effect, in which you feel like people are paying far more attention to you and all of your anxious behaviors and every little aspect of your speech than they actually are. That effect won't have as much power over you. Chapter 3 was about listening. You should know the acronym HURRIER, which stands for hearing, understanding, remembering, interpreting, evaluating, and responding, and encompasses all the aspects of listening. You also need to be aware of the 4 different types of listening: appreciative, which is listening for enjoyment; empathic, listening to understand what someone's feeling; content, listening for information; and critical, listening to judge or evaluate. We use all these types of listening in our daily lives, and they're all important. There are lots of things that get in the way of effective listening. One of those things is ethnocentrism, which is the idea that our group or society is somehow superior to other groups or societies and can cause us to downplay or dismiss the ideas of others who we don't see as part of our group. But it's really important to create a supportive rather than a defensive communication climate, so everyone feels as if they are being heard. In Chapter 4, we start to learn how to begin to create a speech by understanding the 3 general purposes of speeches: to inform, or in other words, to teach or educate; to persuade, which means to attempt to change the thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors of others; or to entertain, which is pretty self-explanatory. Once you've come up with and narrowed down your topic, you need to determine your specific purpose statement, which is basically an infinitive phrase beginning with the word to, as in to inform my audience or to persuade my audience, and specifies exactly what you want to inform or persuade them of. That's usually not too difficult, but coming up with your thesis or central idea, which is a single complete sentence that encapsulates the main idea you want to get across in your speech, can sometimes take a little longer, and you might need to do some research before you're sure how to phrase it. In Chapter 5, we looked at how to adapt our speech to our particular audience. The whole focus of this textbook is on audience-centered speech making, which basically means that you need to keep the audience in mind during the entire speech-making process from beginning to end. Looking at the demographics of your audience, in other words, things like age range, gender, ethnicity, social class, things like that, as well as psychographics, things like attitude, values, ethics held by the audience members, can help you decide how to approach them with your information. You also need to understand the concept of a target audience, which is that portion of your audience that you believe you have the best chance of connecting with during your speech. Then we skip over to Chapter 8, which explains the process of organizing and outlining speeches. You need to understand what main points are, the big main ideas related to your topic that you're trying to get across to the audience. You also need to know the different types of outlines explained in your textbook. The working outline, which is basically what you do to come up with your topic, specific purpose, central idea, and possible main notes, along with any notes you've made to yourself. Working outlines are usually handwritten in a notebook. Then, once you've got everything generally organized, you create your complete sentence outline, which follows specific formatting shown in the textbook or required by the instructor. And finally, the speaking outline, also known as speaking notes, which are usually handwritten on note cards and are a highly edited and condensed version of your complete sentence outline with just enough words on them to remind you of the ideas you're trying to get across, but not so many words that you're tempted to simply read off them. And of course, you need to know the main types of organization patterns that are used in speeches. Topical, which is basically different aspects or subtopics of the main topic. Chronological, which is organized by time or steps involved in a process. Spatial, which has to do with where things are located relative to each other. Narrative, which is organized in story form. Causal, which is basically organized by cause-effect. Problem solution, in which one main point deals with explaining a problem and another main point addresses some solution to that problem. And motivated sequence, which is a 5-step organizational pattern designed to motivate an audience to take some kind of action. The first 4 patterns are usually used in informative speeches, while causal, problem solution, and motivated sequence are generally used for persuasive speeches. In Chapter 9, we learn the most effective ways to begin and end speeches. The primacy effect has to do with first impressions. It's very important to have a good beginning to your speech because that's where you grab the audience's attention and give them reasons to listen to you. And the recency effect, which is more about last impressions, is important because you need to leave your audience with something to remember, a lasting positive impression of your speech. In order to do this effectively, a speech needs to fulfill the function of both introductions and conclusions. The 4 functions of an effective introduction include gaining the audience's attention and focusing it on the topic, establishing yourself as a credible person to speak about the topic, and previewing the body of the speech. The functions of an effective conclusion include summarizing the body, reminding the audience of the speech's purpose, and providing an effective closing statement. There are lots of ways to open and close speeches, but the only one that has a question about it in the midterm is rhetorical questions, which are questions that are not designed to be answered by the audience, simply to get them to start thinking about the topic. You, the speaker, need to provide the answer to a rhetorical question as part of your introduction. Chapter 11 focuses on presentation media, also known as visual aids. We tend to think naturally of PowerPoint or presentation slides because it's the most common visual aid used today. However, there are lots of different types of visual aids. and the best ones for your speech depend on lots of factors. The book discusses a lot of good tips for creating and using visual aids effectively, so make sure you review those so that you're familiar with them. In Chapter 12, you learned about the best, most effective way to deliver a speech. While there are 4 main types of speech delivery, in this class we focus on speaking extemporaneously, which means carefully prepared and practiced, not completely memorized or read, but delivered using note cards. While the other kinds of delivery methods have their place, extemporaneous speaking combines the best of all of the other types while avoiding some of their pitfalls. You also need to be aware of how your voice plays into your speech delivery and the different vocal aspects, like pitch, which is how high or low your voice falls on the musical scale, rate, which is how fast or slow you speak, volume, which is how loud or soft you speak, articulation, how crisply and clearly you say the words. While vocalized pauses like and are common in everyday conversations, it's good to try to limit the number of times you say them in speeches because they tend to stand out more, and also try to avoid speaking in monotone, which is where you don't vary your pitch, rate, volume, all of those things. And it can get very boring very quickly if you're listening to someone who speaks in monotone, so try not to be that person. Finally, Chapter 13 focused specifically on informative speaking and the different kinds of speeches that would fall into this category. Speeches about objects and places, people and other living things, processes — your demonstration speech was a process speech, by the way — events, ideas, and concepts. As long as you're familiar with the differences between informative and persuasive speaking, you should be good. All right, if you have a good grasp on these ideas and concepts, you should do well on the test.